Okay, well, welcome back to Survive and Thrive. This is session 6, coaching clients and students online. We'll be looking at how to help our clients and our students be successful in this new teaching and learning environment. We're going to look at how to prepare them, look at instructional strategies for online teaching, and then we'll wrap up by taking a look at how we can assess our students' progress kind of along the way. As we look at strategies for online instruction, it's helpful to shift our perception away from just being a dog trainer and start to emphasize our work as teachers. And so that is your first secret word today. The first secret word is teacher. Teacher. And while you make a note of that, I think a lot of times people think of dog biz. When you think about us, you think about the businessy type stuff that we do, help with setting rates, policies, that kind of thing. But what some of you might not know is we also spend a lot of time helping dog businesses be more successful with their students. And one of our favorite topics happens to be teaching. Veronica has her master's in education from a previous career. She worked in the university setting, teaching both grad students and teachers about curriculum development and instruction. So you have a real expert here you can ask some questions of today. My background comes from helping to develop the teaching curriculum in the Academy for Dog Trainers when it was at the San Francisco SPCA. And while I was there, I also helped redesign the public class curriculum and have spent about 20 years teaching best teaching and curriculum practices to dog trainers. So we've been at it a while. It's something we're really passionate about. So today we're going to share some of the best tips we have that we've come across, and also talk a little bit about how some tried and true instructional strategies get altered for this online environment. So that's what we're going to do today. Just a reminder that you can ask questions over in the chat. Veronica or I will be over there to have a conversation with you. We want you to share your experiences as well today. With that, I'm going to go ahead and shut off my camera so that I have some bandwidth and you can access the slides more easily. All right, I think a good place to start is where we start each time, and that is reviewing the goals that we've set for ourselves when this program first set out. As we look at our services, let's remember that we're looking for opportunities not only to produce revenue in the short term, but also to help us emerge from this crisis even stronger than when we started. And particularly when we're thinking about teaching clients and students, we need strategies that are going to help us meet these goals so that we can better serve dogs and their people. That's a common goal we all share. So I just want us to have these in the back of our mind as we take a look at teaching strategies today. I want to let you know that today's discussion is structured in 3 parts. First, we're going to take a look at preparation, what we do before each private session or a public class to set students up for success. And then we'll move into teaching. We're going to share some curriculum and instructional tips, as I said, that will help make online learning more successful for your learners. And then we'll get into assessment and talk about ways that you can know that your students are having success, that they're understanding and learning. And it's important that we pay attention to each of these 3 phases of teaching if we're going to be successful teachers and coaches. So that's kind of why we've broken things up this way today. I think it makes sense to go ahead with preparation. That's a good place to start. That's where we should always start with our clients. This is a crucial step to getting our clients started on the right foot. If we don't do some prep work ahead of time, we are likely to end up either with a training session or a class that is frustrating for you and sometimes frustrating for clients. Think about the prep work that you used to do before we went online. You probably told them a thing or two about what kinds of treats you wanted them to have ready. If you're using the clicker, you may have given them some instruction around that. You probably, if you were doing private consults, had some discussion about what they should do if the dog jumps on you when you come to the door. all of that is we still need that prep work. We still need that time. It just looks a little different now that we've moved things online. So we want to think about, what do our clients need to know to be successful online learners, that very first class, that very first session. And part of that is just helping them to come to this work ready and prepared. I will say we want to be careful here that we are not giving them so much information that we overwhelm them, or we make the, things feel too complicated. But we do want to give them enough information that they feel comfortable coming into this new online arena. And this is particularly true when you're talking about technical setup. There are some things you'll need them to know, but don't overwhelm them with too much information. If you've got a lot of info that needs to be covered, for instance, if you're trying to help them learn how to use Zoom or some other type of learning platform, that might need a consultation or 15-20 minute tech startup. You might want to do or a video that they watch ahead of time about how to do that, so that when they come to class and come to the session, they're prepared and they're not all frustrated with the technical side of things. And then along with that, help them set up their training space. And this is as much for you as it is for them, because there is nothing more frustrating than to have your clients floating in and out of frame where you can't see them. So let's help them be successful by helping them set up their training space. And you can do that by having them, if they're not using a computer, they're using something like a phone or something that's a little more portable, have them mark a spot. They can use painter's tape about where that camera goes, and then have them mark a spot where the dog should be. We had some people last time say that they use things like a yoga mat or a rug where the dog will be working, and that way they can set up their camera to make sure that their dog is always in view if they're on that mat. So those are just some ways to kind of really easy, simple ways to help set them up so that they're in the right spot and you can see what you need to see while they're working. I would give them one quick tip about lighting. It doesn't do you any good if they're on camera, but it's so dark you can't see them. So remind them not to work in front of a window, which will be new information for most people. So make sure that they know not to do that. And then also remind them that it needs to be quiet, quiet enough that you can hear them and that they can hear you. And in our kind of hectic, busy households right now, that can be difficult to achieve. So helping them to remind them to think about that ahead of time can be very helpful. Along with that distraction, helping to minimize that, help them think through this because it may not be something that comes naturally for them. So for instance, maybe telling them to put a sign on the door that says, I'm in class right now. Or maybe it's a green circle if they've got little kids. So green means you can come in, and red means mom is in class. You can't. If you're not going to include kids in the training, you might give them some tips for how to keep the kids busy so that mom or dad or both can have some focused training time with you. Ayelet said in the last one, I thought she had a really good point, which is to remind parents of really young kids that you might want to schedule training time for nap time, that can be helpful. Things like, having giving the kids a specific task to accomplish while they're training, etc. Just some tips to kind of get them thinking. Moms and dads are pretty good at that if you just kind of jumpstart the discussion for them. And then also, there's nothing more annoying than being in a session and having their phone go off and interrupt the video, or timers, or household appliances that are humming so loud they can't hear. Just remind them about those as well, to try to create an environment that has as few distractions as possible, understanding that we can't eliminate them all in their homes. Doris says she's providing coloring pages and activity pages with her logo and some tips. I love that as a way to keep kids busy And Jane says, wait to run the dishwasher. Yes, yes, that can be, one of the loudest appliances in the house. Please, especially if you're training in the kitchen. Great. Those are good tips. Keep sharing those over in the chat as they pop in your head. Also then, to put all of this into context, class and consult checklists, putting these into checklists. So, do they have their training set up, their training space set up? Check, great. Do they have, the technical setup? Great. And maybe on that checklist are things like the link to the meeting space that you have set up. Make sure that they have all of that, have access to all of that. And then the other thing with that too is, in addition to the things I've just gone over, don't forget that your checklists also need to have the things that we used to have for training classes and privates too. If you want them to have special treats, if you want them to be on leash or off leash, you might add those to your checklists as well. So over in the chat, if you'll tell us what you're doing, what do you have on your checklist? Is there something specific I haven't mentioned? How are you helping to prepare your students for online lessons and classes? And I saw someone says they've lost my audio. It probably was an individual, but if you're still having audio issues, if someone will put that in the chat for me, that would be great. Doris says that her part of her checklist, proper footwear, treat pouch, waivers signed. That's a good one. Linda asks them to position the camera to record sideways instead of up and down. Oh, thank you for that reminder, Linda. That's brilliant. Yeah, that portrait mode means that's less that you can see of what they're doing. So making sure they're turning that camera sideways if they're using their phone, horizontal, always, always. And I don't know why, for some people that's just really counterintuitive. And so pointing that out is a good one. I'll let you go ahead and continue to add those if you think of other things that we should be adding to our checklists over there. Those are great suggestions. Now I want to turn our attention to how do we teach and how do we teach them? What do we teach them? And of course, this is where we have quite a few tips for you, kind of the meat of the discussion today. And I'm going to start out with one that will not surprise you if you've been on other Survive and Thrive calls. I stressed this last time, but I just think it bears repeating. When we are working with clients, particularly when we're working with clients who are trying to learn a new skill and they're trying to do it in a new environment, it really helps if we try to do less. Less is more. We have a lot of information that we want our clients to know, but they cannot learn it all at once. We cannot open up our trainer brain and do a brain dump. It just won't work that way. They can only take in so much information at one time. And so we want to be really careful to make sure that we're really stressing the things that they most need and not trying to give them too much information all at the same time, because it'll cancel everything out. They won't learn anything. And so this might look like doing less per class or per private lesson, where you may have covered 3 or 4 behaviors. Now, maybe you're only going to cover 1 or 2. For example, let's say that you were, kind of outlining and thinking about cues. You could do an entire session, whether it's a class or a private, you could do an entire lesson on sit. I could easily do that. We could look at how to install it. We could practice it we could talk about practicing it at the front door for food bowl, for the leash, when visitors come over. We could really, in one session, really proof a very good sit. Think of how powerful it is for clients to have a behavior that is so strong they can get it anywhere, as opposed to a dog that kind of half knows a few things. Even better would be to choose a topic or a concept, a skill that you want the client to master, and schedule your whole session around that. So For example, let's suppose that you are focusing on criteria setting. You really want to work with your client on criteria setting. And again, this would work for a class or private, doesn't matter. And maybe you decide that a good vehicle for teaching criteria setting is to use the cue leave it. But there are a lot of ways that you can adjust teaching leave it to talk about criteria. And so you walk the client through the criteria steps of teaching a leave it in the little training area that you have set up. And then you have them move to an area with more distraction, like the kitchen, or if they can't physically move, then you have a discussion around it. And you talk about and have them think about how they will need to adjust their criteria to help their dog be successful. Think of just how powerful that can be and how much time it takes to get that point across. It's not about the number of behaviors that you teach at a time. That is not what is impressive to clients. What you really need to be focused on is training the human and what we're training the human to do. Dog Biz has always emphasized this. And last time I pointed out that we talk about training and teaching the human a lot in this industry, but we don't really do it. And that is because we need to change the way that we think about our coaching and our teaching. Instead of thinking about what we're teaching and training the dogs to do, we have to shift that perspective to what we're training the human to do. What does the human need to know to be successful? Right? What do they need to be able to know and do in order to change their dog's behavior? What concepts do they have to be able to grasp? What does the training plan look like for teaching those concepts? And when I say training plan, I'm talking about the human side. What does the training plan for the human look like? Training the human means focusing primarily on goals for them and less on behaviors for the dog. There are some really specific mechanical skills that they're going to need to learn, like timing. But where you can have the most impact is when you start to focus on teaching bigger picture concepts, skills that handlers need to have a successful life with their dogs. Skills like situational awareness, working at the dog's level, which is just another layman's term for saying criteria setting. They have to be able to problem solve on their own. When we make these bigger goals the center of everything that we do, we make them the center of our lessons, we make them the center of our videos, we make them the center of the type of feedback we give back to clients. If all of those revolve around those goals for the human, we're going to be more successful. And I have an example I wanted to talk about with this. And one is to think about videos. One example of focusing on these bigger goals is to think about why do we do video work? Are we doing video work where we're really doing a bunch of demonstration? And if so, then our emphasis is on teaching behaviors to the dog. It's really very specific behaviors, as opposed to videos that really focus on those big concepts I was talking about: situational awareness, problem solving, criteria setting. And I don't mean by any means like dry presentation of those concepts, like, lecture, not that. I'm talking about, can we find ways to show these concepts and illustrate them through video in action? An example of this would be, let's say you're working a reactive case, and that can be a reactive dog class or privates, either way. But one of the key skills that owners have to have when they have a reactive dog is being situationally aware. They have to know what's going on in their environment when they're out walking. So what if you did a video that puts your client in the shoes of a trainer, right? Maybe, whether you're having someone videotape you or you actually are wearing your camera, but the idea being with this video is that they're going to see what it's like when a trainer walks the reactive dog. And they're going to see it because they're going to both see it in the video and they're going to hear your narration as you do it. And before you even get outside the door, your narration probably is just running them through a mental checklist of that you go through every day before you walk a reactive dog. You probably think about things like, where am I going to walk them? What kind of treats am I going to need? Have we had some training time and I'm going to have to up the treats? Or is this, is this dog going to work for something lower value? What time of day is it? All of that. Those are all things you think about before you ever get outside the door. And then you hit the pavement. And I think that's where the fun really begins, because now you can start to show them what they should be watching for and noticing in the environment. I always joke with my clients that, okay, I'm looking for all the parked cars, because I use parked cars as visual barriers if I've got a dog that I'm trying to keep below threshold sometimes. So talk that through, narrate that for them, let them know that. Also things like if there's a cross street, you as a trainer are looking ahead at that cross street long before they as clients usually do. Tell them, this is the point. I see a crosswalk ahead. I'm going to watch for a dog, to come around the corner. Helping them to get a sense of what you're looking for and when could be so powerful. If what we want is for them to be able to manage these situations, we have to teach them how to do it without us when we aren't there. Because after all, isn't that the true measure of success, right? That they can do it when we aren't there. This is just one idea. I'm sure you have many, and if you do, please, again, share them in the chat. But this idea of, instead of focusing on what the dog is doing, videos that really focus on what the human should be doing, I think could be really great for this industry and a good use of this new online platform. We've got some more coaching tips for the online world, quite a few of them actually. I know Veronica has a few, so at this point I'm going to turn it over to her and let her go through a few more.
Yeah, so Gina's been talking about these bigger picture concepts, these bigger picture goals that we have for students and clients about situational awareness and working at the dog's level, or criteria setting, problem solving, just learning to think a little bit more broadly like a trainer, right? And so I want to look at some ways of helping our learners to engage with these bigger concepts, and also to engage more with each other too, because we know from learning theory that interacting with ideas with other people is a very powerful learning mechanism. And when you think about engagement, it's always been a challenge for us. Before, it was people's busy lives and the fact that the vast majority of dog lovers are a little less interested in the training process than in its outcomes. We're still up against those challenges, but now we have added ones. We have the stress and anxiety of the moment, all the household distraction we're working with, the COVID brain that we're all suffering from. It's never been, good practice, as Gina was talking about with the goal-based videos, it's never been good practice to just talk at people about key concepts like situational awareness, problem solving, etc. And now more than ever, if we want students and clients to internalize and use these ideas and the skill sets required to do so, we need to create opportunities for them to really engage with and interact with and use them. And so we've got a few different ways we can do that. And the first one that I want to focus on is discussion. This is something that Gina and I have always felt is truly underutilized in dog training, which is a real shame. It's always been a part of the curriculum packages that we design because it is so powerful in so many ways. It has a lot of benefits. For one, it creates engagement with ideas. It also creates rapport among students. We've talked about how especially important this is right now, how much people are really craving that connection, in addition to it just being powerful for learning. It also builds a safer place for learners to take action, to try new things, to experiment, to be willing to fail, whether that's in a group setting or in front of their trainer, their mentor, and a safer place to ask questions. It just and we don't learn if we don't do, and so we have to have safe spaces for doing, and discussion can help create those. Using discussion also provides you as the instructor, as the teacher, as the coach, powerful assessment opportunities. And Gina's going to talk a little bit more about that a little later in this session. But the thing is, if we're going to take advantage of the power of discussion, we have to ask the right questions. Asking the right questions is absolutely key to creating successful discussion. And we've all heard over the years, the idea about avoiding yes/no questions that's nothing new. I mean, you ask a yes or no question, someone answers it, conversation over. Conversation never really got started, right? And we also want to avoid questions that seek a specific answer, that seek right answers, that set people up for potential failure, that actually make the space less safe because there's a right and a wrong, and we create the anxiety of coming down on the wrong side of that. And so what we're really looking for are these open-ended questions where there's lots of right ways to answer and really engender conversation. And we want these questions to be focused around these big picture goals that we're teaching. So if you think about a question like, what are the rules of recall? That's just a simple, no pun intended, recall question, right? We're just asking people to say back to us something they've already said. And again, there's right answers and wrong answers. But think about that versus asking, you're doing a demo or you've shown a video of yourself working with the dog, or a random video, and you're saying, asking a question like, why might I be having trouble getting this recall? Or why might the handler be having trouble getting the recall? Or the difference between a question like, should I keep calling, which is just yes or no, or saying, what are some things I could try? How could I re-engage the dog? What could I do to adjust to be working more at the dog's level? Or the difference between a yes/no question like, should I lower criteria, versus what could I do to help Fido be successful right now? How could I do a better job working at his level? These kinds of questions get students applying the concepts. They get them problem solving and using them. The other thing we want to be thinking about are the real life application questions too. Questions like, how could you use this on your next walk? Or how can you use this next time the postman comes up the drive? Or give me 3 ideas, ways that you could incorporate this into day-to-day life over the next few days between now and when we see each other again, talk to each other again. These kinds of real-life application questions help students to see how to take what they're learning beyond the virtual or in-person classroom and apply them. We're often as trainers sort of gobsmacked when we feel like we've taught something, we feel like people are getting it, and then they just fail to apply it outside of the immediate learning context. And we just have to recognize as teachers that that is work we have to do. We have to create that application learning. It very often doesn't happen on its own. So I've shared, some ideas for types of questions and things like that. And a lot of you have been doing this for a long time. If you've got some favorite discussion questions that you like to use with your students or your clients, please share those in the chat. Good questions are worth their weight in gold, and the more you have in your arsenal, the better. So if you've got some that you like, please jump in and share with us. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about is focused group feedback. So this is about applying good question asking to group practice time in your classes. We've talked in the previous session about some of the challenge of doing online classes is what happens when we're sending people out to practice something, and they're all kind of in their own spaces, disconnected from each other while they're doing that. Focus group feedback is a way to provide some structure to that practice time. In this case, rather than just sending everybody out to practice, also having moments where one person is working with their dog while the rest of us are focused on supporting that person, learning from them. Now, obviously, this is something that you don't just surprise people with, right? You want to make sure that if you're asking students to take that hot seat, that they're either volunteering to do it, or you've asked them ahead of time, said, hey, I really love the way you're doing this or that. Would you be willing to share with the rest of the group? So you're not just putting people in the hot seat, right? You're inviting them into it, giving them the option. But with that in mind, when we do this work, we say, okay, Amy, for example, is going to work with her dog, Spot, and we're all going to watch. We have to set that environment up properly for this to be successful. Now, first of all, you're wanting, you've done the safe space building to begin with. It's, you're using your discussion and various other methods to make sure that it's a safe space to start with. But then it's also really important that you're asking a specific style of question that's based around the goals that you're trying to elicit learning around, but also that really shape a positive environment, that shape positive feedback and community building as part of the activity. If you look at the questions, the examples that we've put up here, you can tell that two things are going on. One, that this lesson was about working at the dog's level, that's the goal of this group feedback session, is reinforcing this concept of criteria setting or working at the dog's level. And also that all of the questions are specifically designed to keep people focused, to keep the group focused on sharing positive feedback with Amy. We're not looking for group criticism, we're looking for the positive feedback. What can we learn from what Amy's doing well? So questions like, what did you see Amy do really well? What did Amy do to help set Spot up for success? What adjustments did you see Amy make to work at Spot's level? Right? So, what is she doing when she realizes that something's a little bit too challenging for him, or that the environment's changed, etc.? What did she do to help Spot when he was struggling? And then this one I really love. What did you see Amy do that you want to incorporate in your own training? Because again, you're wrapping with that application piece. What are you going to do? This learning that just happened, how are you going to incorporate it into your own life with your dog? So this can be a really powerful way to build community, to reinforce community, and to create some really powerful learning. We do this a lot in our dog walking academy program. We find that when we take the field trip, people often report to us, they learn more from watching their fellow students walk the dogs than they do from the dog walk themselves. But then after they've walked, we all stop and say, like, okay, what just happened there that was really powerful? Because people are often self-critical and they don't recognize all the amazing choices that they were making. So we take a moment as a group to point all of those out so that the person who's doing the work gets the learning as well. It's very powerful. Okay, so then another tool that you can use is video review. I'm going to talk about what this might look like in classes first, and then we'll talk about it in private training as well. You can do similar work to what I was just talking about with video review. And this can be review of students themselves, video they've sent in. It can be video that you've taken of yourself working a dog. It can be random video that you've chosen, maybe video from past clients or students that have given you permission, or friends training their dogs, whatnot. And so then you can send the video ahead or not. That's optional. And then when you are watching the video together in class, this should be a guided process. It shouldn't be random. You need to go in knowing what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what big picture goals or concepts you're teaching toward. One of the things that can be very interesting is to start by watching it and just watching it without any narration yourself. You're not pointing anything out, and asking a general question like, what did you see? What's interesting about that is it gives you an opportunity to hear where your students are focused. What are they looking at? What are they noticing? Are they starting to incorporate and apply some of the concepts that you're teaching? So it's just that's an interesting moment for you as an instructor. But then you're going to watch it again, but give them instructions for the viewing. What do you want them to watch for or focus on while they're watching? Maybe you want them to count some things. Maybe you want them to look at rate of reinforcement and count how many times the dog is reinforced. Or maybe you want them to look at timing, and you want them to, notice moments where there was a missed opportunity. Or maybe you're looking at criteria setting, and so you want them to focus on where are they working at the dog's level? What are they doing to set the dog up for success? What adjustments did they need to make, etc. And so really giving them something to focus on. And then after you've done that, so with those instructions in mind, you either review it together, or if you have a larger group and you're using a platform that allows it, you might even break people into smaller breakout groups to watch together, and put their answers together and come back and share. And then your last bit of this is to then, after we've watched the video, to use discussion questions to pull the learning out of that. How many opportunities were there? Things like, how many opportunities were there to blank? Maybe it's reward the dog, for example. How many missed opportunities? When would you have ... When would you have clicked? When would you have created more distance? When would you have increased the rate of reinforcement, etc.? And then also to ask questions that really get that problem-solving part of the application process going. Things like, hey, why do you think the dog's behavior changed so suddenly 30 seconds in? Let's look at that part again. What do you think is going on there? And what advice do you have for the handler in the video at that moment? What could they have done to help the dog re-engage, or to avoid the dog disengaging, etc.? So you're looking for, again, those specific questions to work on the concepts you're teaching and the application around that. Okay, so then if you think about applying this to video review to private training, you follow much the same process that we just looked at in the video review for classes. And in this case, though, you're asking the client to send video ahead of themselves. Now, if you've got clients who are a little bit wary of doing that, you can always start by doing this process with other video that's not of your client, just to kind of get them into the process and get them comfortable with it, and for them to see that it's going to be a really positive, positive approach that you're taking to it. And then you can do much the same thing. Watch once together without giving any feedback yourself. Ask the client what they see. What do they see themselves doing that's really working well? Is there anything that now that they've seen it that they would adjust or do differently? They're going to learn a lot from that, and you're going to learn a lot from that too, in terms of where their learning is. And then you do the same thing that you did in the group setting, in the class setting, is you watch again with a specific focus. Either you can narrate yourself, or you can ask the client to jump in and narrate based on that focus, or you can do a little bit of half and half. And you always wrap with, again, those learning application questions, getting that discussion going, asking the client to summarize their takeaway from watching the video together. What will they do differently? How will they use this? What specifically can they apply in their day-to-day life? What's going to change based on this? What are their plans going forward? And so really getting them to engage around that with you. You don't just review the video and leave it. You review the video and step back and basically, have that conversation. What did we learn, and what are we going to do with it? So that can be really powerful in a one-on-one setting as well. The last sort of instructional strategy that we want to share with you, this applies in group settings, it applies in one-on-one, it applies whether you're online or you're offline, you're in person, whatever you're doing, that in all of these learning opportunities, it is critical to fade your prompts, just as important as it is in dog training. We've got to help students proof for real life by treating the directions or the direct instruction we give as scaffolding, something that you put up and is heavy to provide that support in the beginning, but that has to be removed as you build. Because, and this is so important, you can't be there in real life, right? How many times as a dog trainer have you said that? How many times have you heard fellow dog trainers say that? We're not living with the dog. The clients are living with the dog. The students living with the dog. We say that, but then we don't stop to think about its implications for how we teach. We tend as dog trainers to overteach and create learned helplessness. We spend too much time telling people what they should do, exactly how they should do it, and when they should do it. We stand at their elbow and say, okay, now click, or now move a few feet back, or, oh gosh, hey, there's a dog coming, so we're going to create distance. And we're constantly giving instruction. And I think part of the reason that teaching online feels so frightening is because it's harder to do that. We're not standing right at their elbow in quite the same way anymore. But as we've had the conversation in some past sessions, in some ways that might really be a blessing for us too, because it gives us the opportunity to become better teachers. I just glanced at the group chat and Kelly says we need to take the training wheels off. That is a perfect analogy. We often fail to remove the training wheels. I love that. The thing is, these bigger picture goals like situational awareness, understanding what's going on in the environment, noticing things, anticipating and seeing how the changes in the environment impact the dog, and how that interplays with working at the dog's level or criteria setting, and then problem solving. Something's changed in the environment. What do I need to do to adjust to work at the dog's level? Like those sorts of things, people will never learn how to do them if we keep telling them what to do. And those are the things that make an enormous difference in the relationship between the dog and the human, right? We have to help the clients and students stand on their own 2 feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a 4-step instructional strategy that is something that if you can start to learn this and learn how to use it, this is how you fade your prompts. This is a specific strategy, a 4-step strategy for fading your prompts with students and clients, anyone you're teaching. Okay. The first step is always direct instruction, right? When people are brand new learners, they're just learning something, the scaffolding's up high, we're using a lot of it. So for example, we say to people, Fido's distracted by the activity going on in the other room. Let's try pulling out the higher value treats to help him work successfully at his level. We identify the problem. We tell them exactly what to do about it, right? This is what we tend to do. And this is important to do in the beginning. People need this kind of support in the beginning. The mistake we make is we often never move off of step 1. And you want to get off step 1 as fast as possible, right? It's like, it's like fading your, if you're doing luring, it's like fading the food prompt. You want to get off of that as quickly as possible if people are going to be able to eventually, if dogs eventually going to be able to, operate verbal from a distance around a corner, right? We've got to start fading that. So first we simply tell them what to do, and that's fine. But now we want to move to step 2 as quickly as we can. Gosh, Fido seems distracted. What do you think might be distracting him? So in step 1, we said, he's distracted, and here's what he's distracted by. In step 2, we say, he's distracted, but then we already in step 2, we're asking the client to start problem solving with us. We're asking the client to start being part of this process, start taking responsibility. And then we say, so there are a few options for working at Fido's level to help him handle this new distraction. We could make the exercise easier. We could use higher value treats. Which would you like to try? In other words, we say, here are 2 or 3 or 4 things that are in your toolbox, things that we've already worked on together. Let me remind you what these are. But I'm going to ask the client to take responsibility, or the student to take responsibility for deciding which tool to pull out of the box. All right, so I'm starting to hand the reins over a little bit, but I'm still supporting. Now we move to step 3. And step 3, the difference is, there's a couple differences. So first we just say, hey, Fido seems like he's having a hard time with this exercise. What do you think might be going on? So in steps 1 and 2, I said he's distracted. And now I'm not even using that word. I'm asking the client to pick their head up and realize, and to give me, to assess it and to share that assessment with me. For the client to say, oh gosh, you know what? I just realized that he's probably distracted by the kids playing in the other room. Ah, okay, great. And then I say, what could you try to help him be successful, to put this exercise at his level? Here I'm asking the learner to recall the tools at their disposal. I'm asking the learner to remind me what's in their toolbox and pick something out. So I'm just pulling my scaffolding, my support back a little bit. I'm prompting, but the prompt is much lighter. They're having to take much more responsibility for the problem solving in step 3 than they even were in step 2. And I'm doing all of this because my goal is to get to step 4. So as you're doing all, as you're starting to move away from step 1, you start leaving a little pause before you jump in and give instruction. You start waiting to see what the client might do or notice on their own before you step in. And here is where you're headed. The pinnacle, the destination, is the unprompted adjustment, where you wait a beat and the client notices the distraction on their own. And not only do they notice it, they do something about it. They make an unprompted adjustment. And at that point, your only job is to reinforce the heck out of that moment. And also to pump your fists in the air and, jump up and down and get really excited for yourself as a teacher, because you know you're successful. So in this one, what's really important is to be explicit. You don't just say, oh, good job. Good job, what? And so in this case, oh man, fantastic. I noticed that you switched to your top treats when you saw that Fido was becoming distracted by something in the other room and starting to struggle. Great decision. You're really working at his level, right? You are explicitly reinforcing what you saw them do and using the language around these bigger picture concepts that you're trying to teach, or whatever, if it was a specific skill you were trying to teach, etc. Right? This works for anything you're doing. This is when you know that you're rocking it. This is when you know that you're meeting with success. And so if you try step 3 and you ask a question like, what could you try to help him be successful, to put this exercise at his level, and the client gives you a blank stare, you just realize, oh, step the criteria up a little bit too fast. You step back to 2 and say, well, for example, a couple of the things in your toolbox are, you could do this or you could do this. Can you think of any other things you could do too? So you can sort of start to kind of bridge the gap between one or the other. But you're always trying to think to yourself, where am I on this 4-point scale? What do I want to try? And starting to really incorporate this kind of thinking in any teaching you're doing is going to help you end up with learners who are truly independent and who learn how to act differently with their dogs in the real world, who learn how to take what you're teaching them into real life and not only be able to do it when you're prompting. I hope that that's something that you'll really enjoy incorporating into your teaching. And so I've been talking about that moment of realizing that you are successful because you've hit step 4. And I'm going to hand it back over to Gina, because she's going to talk a little bit more about assessing success.
Yeah, so we've prepared our clients for success, right? We've done the prep work to help them be successful. Veronica is giving you some great ideas for effective ways to do your teaching. But how do we know our clients are learning? How do we know they've been successful? And I wanted to include this today because I've seen this question come up several times in our group chats in other previous Survive and Thrives. And I think that this question is coming up because it's one of those situations where we're doing something new and we forget what we already know, that we already have some strategies for this. So I just want to remind us of some strategies we have, and take a look at some new ones too that apply specifically to online. But before we get to that, before you can start to think about what an assessment looks like, you have to know what you're assessing. What are you looking for? And I think our education system, this is a place where we frequently have a breakdown where we get it wrong, at least in the United States. And so I think it's a good illustration. When we focus with our children on things like, can they do their times tables in 1 minute or 2 minutes, right? When we give them those types of assessments, they're frequently given those assessments because those are easy assessments to do. Like, did they meet that or not? But what have you really assessed? What you've really assessed is, can they memorize? Were they able to memorize multiplication tables? I don't think that's what teachers are actually going for. I suspect what they really want to know is, Do our students understand the concept of multiplication? Can they do problem solving? So you have to be careful that your assessment, that you ask the right question when you go to think about your assessment. We do this in dog training too. We look to see, is the dog sitting? And we measure, that's how we assess. Does the dog sit when the owner tells it to? It seems like a reasonable assessment, but stop and think, is that really what you want to know? Do you want to know that when you are online videoing with someone and they say sit, that their dog sits? Is that success? Is that what you're going for? Or what are you looking for? A dog that says sit most of the time, but more importantly, a client who knows how to make adjustments when their dog isn't successful. Almost like the sit part is irrelevant. Do you have a client that knows how to adjust the situation, adjust criteria to help their dog be successful? Isn't that more predictive of whether or not the client is actually going to get a sit in a new environment than just whether or not he sat right in this moment? So you have to know what you want to know before you start thinking about assessments, in other words. And in this case, focusing on your human learner and on those bigger picture goals we've been talking about for them is going to help you to have a better assessment. So let's look at some typical assessment opportunities. Again, just because we're working with them online doesn't mean we never get eyeballs on them. So I just wanted to remind ourselves of this. I know it can feel limiting because it's not the same as being in the room with them, but we do have opportunities to see them work, whether it's on screen, whether we break them out in breakout groups where we're with them one-on-one or in small groups, whether we use video, having them send us videos that we can take a look at. There are ways for us to get our eyes on our clients. But those aren't the only assessment tools we have. We have been hinting at some of these throughout the conversation today. As Veronica was saying earlier, if we're doing video review and our clients are able to engage in group feedback and to offer really good group feedback, that tells us something about whether or not they're getting those concepts that we're trying to get across to them. You can do that same thing with just questions asked and answered. When you ask questions, when you make up a scenario and have them try to problem shoot or tell you how they would handle it, can they do that? Those aren't just questions, those are assessments. You're able to see, is the client ready and prepared, or do I need to go back and do some more teaching? Discussions, whether they be group discussions or one-on-one discussions, are another time for this. And of course, those application questions that Veronica talks about, which we hope you're wrapping in to so many of your sessions frequently. We always want to bring it back to application. We don't want to stop at the multiplication test. We want to go ahead and bring it all the way through and see if they can apply what they've learned. And so those can be questions like, what are your biggest takeaways from this exercise that we just did? What are think on your toolbox and think about these different things that we've been talking about: criteria setting and situational awareness. What are the tools that you're using in day-to-day situations? And which ones, in which situations? Getting them to really take what they've been learning and then apply that wherever situation that they're in. It's so interesting that I just think it's funny that our knee-jerk reaction to going online was, oh, but I can't see them. Because what that reminds me of is working with reactive dog clients. How many times have you sat through a consultation and you're taking a history, and either whether it's reactive dog or aggression or fear, and they want to show you, like, as if you've never seen a dog bark at another dog and lunge, and just, you won't really get it if you don't see their dog doing it. We've all kind of, laughed to ourselves and had that experience, right? Well, we don't have to, we don't have to see our clients' success. They don't have to show us in order for that success to be there. They can tell us, and then we can believe them. When they say life is easier with my dog, or I was able to take a walk and, you know, I didn't have any explosions, those are a chance for us to assess whether or not we've been successful. So they don't always have to show us. Sometimes they can tell us, and we can just, you know, as trainers, accept that if they say their life is better with dogs, that, you know, we're getting there. And we know that when we teach them these concepts and they get these concepts, the dog is going to learn too. If they're doing a good job of training, the dog is going to learn. And so we can take our focus off the dog and really put it on the human. And I think that's important. Before we wrap up today, I just want to get you guys busy over in the chat with telling us about what your biggest takeaways from today are. What ideas have you either heard or seen in the chat that you think, yeah, I really want to incorporate that into what I'm doing? That could be really valuable for my clients, or that could be really valuable for me. There have been a lot of great tips in the chat. So just share, you know, you've spent a whole hour with us today. What are you going to do with it? How's this going to be valuable? And Dora says less hand holding for sure. I think that is a good one. Janet says video for the starter pack. I think she's referring to the checklist idea, putting that on video for people before they get started. That's a good one. The 4-step plan. Wendy says the 4-step plan to fade prompts. Yeah, we can all be better coaches and teachers if we can keep that in the back of our mind. You're going so fast now, you're putting in, I can't even keep up with you. That's great. Veronica, you can pull some out too.
Yeah, Janet says questions to judge client comprehension. Less is more for BDT, review video together. Love it. Shelly's going to use more checklists and work more at fading prompts. Lorianne's going to pull out the GoPro and take a walk.
I love it. I love
it. Michael says 4 steps and open feedback questions. Laura says it spurred an idea for remote clients of having a shared Google Doc that gives them some homework to start thinking about real life situations using the tools they've built. That's awesome. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Yeah, a lot of people saying the 4-step process. Yeah, it's always been, you know, I've literally taught everything from preschool through junior high and high school and grad school, and, you know, dog lovers and dog trainers. And I have found that process to be just one of the most valuable teaching tools of anything in my teaching toolbox. So I'm really glad you guys are excited about that. Oh, fantastic. People are going to be using video. Oh, love it, love it, love it. Okay. Fabulous. So we're getting close to the end here, and we owe you a second secret word. And that second secret word is learner, learner. And type it into the chat pod here real quick, just in case. So learner, you know, one of the things that was always really center for me in teacher education when I was working with teachers is helping them to understand that the best teachers are learners. As trainers, we have experienced this concept on a profound level with dogs. We should all be able to relate to this. We're supposed to be teaching the dogs, right? But who among us can't recount invaluable lessons from a dog we've lived with or a dog we've worked with, right? What trainer hasn't had a dog as a teacher, right? Just had the whole thing flip on its head. The best teachers recognize that we are all learners, and so create environments and opportunities to learn together with students, clients, whoever your learners are. When you allow yourself to remain a learner while assuming the mantle of teacher, you open yourself to amazing insight and growth. You free yourself from having to know everything and have it all figured out, to have everything be perfect, right? What's most important is to just focus on orchestrating situations that promote learning, to create safe spaces for it, and then to invite your learners to join you in that space, and to be there with them, to join them there. you all have opened yourself to being learners together in Survive and Thrive. And we've endeavored to do that too, to really join you in that process. And I think a huge part of the value of this program has been all of us agreeing to learn from each other and to teach each other. And in so doing, we've created more ideas and knowledge than we possibly could have individually. And if you take that spirit that you've brought into this program, you take that into your coaching, whether it's online or in person, whether it's groups or individual, you will create amazing spaces for dog lovers to learn and grow, and for yourself too, as an instructor as well. And so we hope that we've just sort of inspired some excitement and confidence to go in there, and just remembering that, again, part of the message is that it doesn't have to be perfect, right? You go in with that vulnerability of being open and learning, having a plan, and then learning from the moment together with your learners. So that's our sort of parting message for today. We also have a quick program note. So next session is Tuesday 12th, and on the really interesting and wonderful conversations going on in the Facebook group, we've decided to turn our attention in the next session to the prep work of getting ready for restart, whenever that may be in your area. It's going to be different everywhere. But, we have these 3 goals that we keep putting at the front of each of these conversations. And one of them is the goal for you to come out stronger from this. And so we sort of turn our attention to that discussion about, what do we need to do now to take everything we've been learning together and to start getting ready for that emergence, to get ready for what it looks like next. So that's what we'll be focusing on Tuesday. We'll miss you until then, but we'll be seeing you in the Facebook group and keeping the conversation there. And we really look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday as well.